Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I'm Kathryn, and that is Paul because Emily is stuck at work. So Paul is the last second stand-in guest while Emily is working.
Well,
Welcome
I
back.
am I am always happy to stand in for Emily and happy to be available and to be able to do this. So, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, we are going to Monza this week. Obviously, we had a very exciting race last week at Zandvoort. Now we are going straight back into it with the second part of our doubleheader, going to the Italian Grand Prix. It is going to be a really interesting race in a lot of ways. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about some news that has happened
Absolutely.
this week, which I was actually going into like last night thinking, oh, we're not going to have anything to talk about. And then all of a sudden there were like these three big pieces of news that came out today. I was like, oh, we will have things to talk about. Thank goodness.
There we go.
Yeah. And I want to start off with like, usually like this is the motorsport figurehead that we don't get annoyed with. And I'm really shocked that he's come out and said something this stupid.
Well, in today's social media world where everyone has the attention span of a gnat, I guess that's what makes this work.
I mean, the problem here is that I don't disagree. So for context, Stefano Domenicali, he has come out and said that he wants to start making some changes to Formula One and the format and, maybe ditch some free practices, which we've already seen with the sprint races. But then he said that Formula One races are too long, which I really would have hoped that he had, before coming out and saying something so bold, that he would actually do the research.
Well, and let's actually talk about uh, what people are seeing on Formula One television throughout the world. You are seeing kids and young boys and young girls in the stands actually taking part in what is just a wonderful weekend spectacle of races. Now, I don't mind, getting rid of FP1 and FP2, as they say, or getting rid of the free practices on Fridays. But to say that the race is too long, I think is just short sighted.
Yeah, so I really credit the people who like listened to the statement or read the statement whenever it was that it came out, and then started looking up the receipts. Per Motorsport.com, basically immediately posted like a side by side of Domenicali's statement and then the average race length in 2025. Where to start off, you have NASCAR. 3 hours and 14 minutes. And I will say that that is too long, but I think that any minutes you spend watching NASCAR is too long. So, and that's just me, but that's the grand leader here, 314.
Yes,
Then
sorry to interrupt you there, but NASCAR, when they did their redesign of races, figured out a way how to make it longer.
right, exactly. They're like, how can we get more people to spend more time and spend more money at this, racing facility that's literally in like the middle of nowhere? And that's probably also like an outlier because everything else is kind of in, I wouldn't call it the most similar range, but if you compare Formula One to the closest thing we have as a US equivalent in IndyCar, there's about 10 minutes of difference between their average length times, with the average length of an IndyCar race this season at an hour and 44 minutes, whereas an average Formula One race is an hour 32.
True. Now, what is interesting about this is with Indy cars, you have not only more mandatory pit stops, but also refueling, which Formula
Right.
One doesn't do. And with the new generation of cars coming out that will have spend more with the electrical systems and battery powered systems versus gas and fuel systems, that's actually, there's a good possibility that will continue to come down.
Yeah, exactly. But like the question is, this is the pinnacle of motorsport. How much faster do you want these races? Because the other two major, motorsport series that they compared to are Formula E, which is an average length of 49 minutes, and MotoGP, which is an average length of 41 minutes. And now two Formula E and MotoGP's credit, they have 2 races per weekend because they have like a sprint race and a feature race, like what you see in like the lower series in F2 and F3. But we don't need a sprint weekend every single weekend in Formula One.
Correct. Correct. And the
6
question,
is enough.
I don't disagree. But I will say this, what Stefano also said is talking about reverse grids. Now, if you want to eliminate a sprint qualifying and a race qualifying, take the race qualifier and use that as a reverse grid for the sprint, now you might have something that's actually interesting that people would want to see.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. Obviously, we have a reverse grid in F1 Academy right now, which, as I have said many times when we talk about F1 Academy, the only problem is that the reverse grid race is the same length as the regular race.
Right.
But if you also think about the F1 sprint weekend calendar from a couple of years ago, the one that we shockingly actually like, that's the one where your qualifying or your sprint position sets the grid for Sunday. And that way you can eliminate an entire practice session, which I don't necessarily think is the best idea, for an entire season. And you still have, a reason to give a damn about a sprint race instead of doing what most teams do when you qualify poorly, is you turn the sprint race into a pseudo practice session, test session to prepare yourself for the upcoming qualifying session to then get ready for Sunday. But I don't think that it's I don't think it's a matter of making striving to make the current Grand Prix races shorter.
I agree with you. The one thing that I would say is that if you're going to take a sprint race and make it the qualifying grid for the main race, that's great, but you really need to solve the problem of drafting and being able to have drivers pass each other and not being in one very long DRS train or whatever they're going to call it next year.
Right.
And because if you look at Hungary, where everybody started is basically where everybody finished, at least in the top 8.
Yeah, that's the other problem is it's not a question of are F1 races boring. It's like shortening the F1 race isn't going to solve the problem that we've run into where prior to Zandvoort, the 3 races beforehand were not winners. And then we know they all can't be bangers. But the problem that needs to be solved is how to be able to follow quicker and how to be able to overtake, and the answer is going to be smaller cars, and even smaller than the cars that we're going to be getting in the new era in 2026. So that's what Domenicali needs to focus on more, is fixing the problem of overtaking and cars on track, which is not going to magically fix something like Monaco where you'd have to go real tiny in order to have a good race in Monaco. But at least if you have smaller cars in most of the tracks, you will eliminate a lot of this overtaking problem that we're seeing, which leads to the F1 race being determined at qualifying unless somebody really screws up or we have weather.
And exactly. And Zandvoort was a lot of fun. There were a lot of opportunities, and listen, there are still people in this world who are, betting that, a car decides to take a dump the way Lando's car did.
Right,
And
which apparently was actually a chassis issue and not an engine issue. So there might be a little less worry about reliability than we think, unless that's just what they're saying because they're terrified of this idea that Oscar's going to run away with the championship when they really want Lando to be the winner.
well, that's another story. And, it's Zach's world and we're all living in it right now.
Exactly. So
So,
anyway,
go ahead. I was going to say, just let's move on to the big livery news of the week, quote unquote.
so here's the thing. The more I look at it, the more I don't like it, but the more it does actually solve one problem that I really, really don't like of the regular livery, and that is the rear wing. Because the rear wing of the regular Ferrari has the stupid white wing with those stupid HP logos front and center. This livery, which they're going retro to pay homage to the 1975 car that Niki Lauda drove to the World Championship and the Constructors Championship. So it's great, but they solved the issue of having the awful, rear wing is now a black rear wing with the HP logos. So you can have the HP logos and not make them look that stupid.
It's a much better rear wing. I'm still hoping that one day someone in marketing will realize, hey, we should really do an all blue car.
Yeah, that's unfortunately never going to happen. But we all want that. And that said, they added more white at the top of the car to, I guess, take overcome the fact that they took the white off the wings. And it obviously matches with the 312 T that now Lauda drove, but it just makes it look so bad. Like, a Ferrari should not have as much white as on that car. A modern Ferrari should not have that much white on the car.
Well, if you look at the two cars, I get what they were trying to do, but because the way the carbon fiber has evolved with these cars, there's a lot less there's a lot less carbon fiber covering the front of the car than there is in the middle of the car. So
Right.
when you have this white over the exhaust intake, yes, it's an homage to the 312T, but it's not. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't have the same effect, and it's like, there's almost not enough red. There's not enough Ferrari red.
Honestly, though, when I first saw pictures of the new livery, my first initial thought was it's way too early to be dealing with this, and then my second thought was I don't see a significant difference. Obviously, it is pretty significant, but I think it's significant in a way that just seems messy. Like the car, like it's like, here are elements from the 1975 car, and we're just kind of going to throw it onto the 2025 car and expand some things and shrink some things, but it doesn't look like a clean livery. And like even Steak has come up with some ugly liveries, but at least they look like they're supposed, what they're trying to do. I didn't know what they were trying to do until I saw a side by side of the 2025 Monza livery and the 1975 car.
The one thing that I believe that they got right is the fact that you have the signature font of each driver
Yes.
on the car in the right place, which actually is the closest thing to the 1975 Niki Lauda car that is on this 2025 livery.
Yeah, I'll agree with you for that. And they did something. The wheel rims, they managed to pretty much replicate them from the original car to the modern car. So I thought that was interesting too. But like that, those things aren't really going to read on TV. Like, you can't read a driver's name as he's going 200 miles an hour down a straight.
This
So
is true.
it's just like, it's like Ferrari, as Emily says, and because Emily's not here, I'm going to say it for her. Thousands of people have to approve of this before you hit print, and they've hit print on a livery that is, it feels very sloppy, not too dissimilarly from that livery that Red Bull put out that looked like the splatter paint that I really hated from last season. And it's like, just give us a red car and let everyone else live their life.
Exactly. No, I agree with you. I agree with you. And as we'll discuss later on in our predictions, I don't think it's going to help.
Oh, it's definitely not. Nor will the Niki Lauda tribute helmet that Lewis is going to be wearing this weekend. I don't think that's going to help him much either. But that remains to be seen. I mean, Niki Lauda has been a mentor and was a very important figure in Lewis's career, especially during his time at Mercedes. So maybe the helmet will help. But Ferrari needs all the help that they could get to survive, not just what they went through last week, but what they went through before the summer break. If you look at Hungary, A, Lewis had a terrible time, and B, Charles should have won that race had the car not decided, halfway through the race that it didn't want to cooperate anymore and wanted to just like let the McLarens on through.
The best thing about Lewis, I will say, is he has a great sense of history, and he
Yes.
understands the people that came and supported him, and where he came from, and how he can, use that to pay it forward. So I have to give Lewis credit for that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there, and it's a nice helmet. I think the yellow also, I've had a problem with the yellow on his standard helmet because it's not the Ferrari yellow, and if he's gonna have a yellow helmet, why not be the Ferrari yellow helmet? But anyway, I do think that this helmet, it's not completely different from the typical helmet he wears this season, but it's a fine helmet and a nice homage, and honestly, a better homage to Niki Lauda than the car that he's going to be driving.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
Now, since this is the podcast that only talks about the future,
correct.
let's get the third very important piece of information that came out this week.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting in a lot of ways. So, first things first, Cadillac officially announced that Colton Herta is going to be leaving IndyCar in 2026 to become their test driver, which is so interesting in a lot of ways, starting with the rumor that came out at like a week or two ago that Herta has been planning on leaving IndyCar to start driving in Formula 2.
This is quite interesting because this also kind of solves the issue with Cadillac, because there was, when Cadillac got approved to be the 11th team on the grid, everybody figured, well, we're going to have an American driver. Now, of course, with the drivers that they have selected, this kind of solves that problem.
Yeah, I mean, Sergio Perez is a very popular figure in the Americas. And,
Correct.
I honestly, the entire time I thought that that was the closest they were going to get. But then Cadillac announced Colton Herta. Now, also very important to remember that Cadillac Formula One team, owned by TWG Global, is basically Andretti in a different hat. And that is interesting because who has Colton Herta been driving for the last few years in IndyCar?
Well, how about Andretti?
Yeah, so
Cool.
he's not going anywhere. Like payroll isn't going to have to change anything. Like they're gonna like his job title's gonna change, but he's not gonna have to do like opening hiring day paperwork or like learn. He's gonna have to learn the new European factory. But it's like he's not going anywhere new, which is funny, but it also does make sense.
Well, and it does make a lot of sense. The thing that I'm most interested in is Colton Herta is still 5 points short for a super license.
Right.
So what is he going to be doing in over the rest of this season and the beginning of next season to actually get those 5 points?
Well, if you remember going back to a couple of years ago, Logan Sargent, when he was becoming the next American driver to join Formula One after, I think, not the last Andretti to do it, but like after a million years, was driving in enough practice sessions. If you drive in 100 kilometers in a practice session, that gives you a point. And so the more practice sessions you drive, the more singular points. And if he's only 5 points short, that's just, a season's worth of practice sessions. Plus maybe he comes in later in the year as a favor to, another team that doesn't care because they have 4 practice sessions and they don't have a real candidate driver that they need to train. So that is an option. And it also leads into, if he goes into Formula 2 and wrecks Formula 2 and wins, boom, he's got his license.
True.
But here's the thing. Obviously, Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas have both signed with Cadillac in multi-year deals. So it's not like he's coming in to do a year as a test driver and then he's got a seat, unless there's something that the Perez camp and the Bottas camp are not telling us, which I just don't see, because why would you come back? Why would you come out of forced retirement to just do a year and then be like, you know what, that was cool, but I'm going to give it to this kid?
Yeah. No, I can't see it, and I think that you know especially in the first season with new regulations, you're going to want people who can actually do what I believe Carlos Sainz is doing today for Williams, and really being the on track engineer for the team to really understand
Right.
what needs to be done.
Yeah. So it's not like he's coming on and he's going to get straight into a Formula One car. Now, if this rumor of, joining F2 comes to fruition, that's going to, I think, cause a few problems. So right now the rumors he's going to join Prima, which is where Ollie Behrman and Kimi Antonelli came out of. The rumor is he's going to join them in 2026. So he would be racing in F2, which would give him some experience in the stepping stone to F1 and get him more experience on the European tracks that he's obviously not getting now in IndyCar. But he's also a little old to be going into the feeder series.
I would agree with that. I mean, when you look at Kimi just turned 18, and Huerta I think is 25, but
Right.
we're talking about 6 or 7 years, and all of these kids started in karting when they were 5, 6, 7 years old. So it's just a different dynamic that's going to be, I think, a challenge. The question will be if Colton actually, can bring some of the advertising dollars that I think that Cadillac and anything that F2 will be looking for.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me to send him there because, even if this is like a 3-4 year project out, you do 2 years in F2. Like, what I want to know the direction that Cadillac pitched to Herta to say you're going to leave this racing series that, let's be real, IndyCar may not get the more super license points compared to F2 and F3, but it's still like IndyCar is still like the top tier racing series in the United States. And it is, if not on par with it, I mean, it is on par with Formula, or it's beyond par with Formula 2 because it's not a spec series. But like you're gonna go down, drop a level for a couple of years while Botas and Perez do what they do, and then what? Like, wait for them to eventually retire, go to another team. Like, the goal obviously is to have an American driver on this American team, but I want to know the writing on the wall that we're not being shown.
And that's the real question, because if there is some sort of side deal out there that Colton is going to be available to teams in 27 or maybe in 28, he's 25 is not old from an age perspective, but from an experience perspective, it could be significant. Now, if he's going to become, a reserve driver for Mercedes after a while, that could be interesting down the road.
Yeah, it's really there's so many questions, like why is he doing this? I think is the biggest one, because it's not just, oh, I'm really excited to be an American driver representing this American team that is currently hosting a Mexican and a Finnish driver. Like, I just don't know where they're going with this, through the lens of Perez and Botas have long-term contracts. Obviously, the reserve driver pool does not have anybody that jumps out at me that's ready to take that next step that Cadillac would look to first, because I'm sure Zhou Guanyu is happy at Ferrari. Nobody's going to be leaving the Red Bull family until they have to, or until they drive their career into a wall, like Liam Lawson seems to be about to be doing. And everyone else kind of shares, and the Aston Martin reserve drivers are never going to make it to Formula One. So it makes sense that it would be someone like Herta, but still Herta has a long time to also not be racing if he's choosing this test driver gig.
I agree. Now, one thing in Colton's favor is that in the IndyCar for his career, he's got 9 wins, he's got 19 podiums and 16 poles. So that's not too shabby. So
Mm-hmm.
he's got experience, and remember that in IndyCars you've got you know anywhere up to 33 drivers.
Right.
on the track. And right, he's going to go from 33 to 22. And there's a there's a lot more room for opportunity there when you don't have to pit and end up going from 28th to get back to 12th.
Right, exactly. So it's not a move that Cadillac has made that I think shows a writing over the wall of like this is going to go really badly. I think honestly we get more concern out of the future of the Sauber Audi transition, but I am very curious to see where we're going to go with this. Obviously, it is September. They will unveil the car sometime in January probably. So we've got a lot of time for them to start putting all of these things in place and to start really getting their plans together. Obviously, their drivers are going to have to start preparing now that their summer break that's lasted a year is finally over. So it will be very interesting to see as Cadillac moves forward how they're going to go with all of this.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. So let's move to Monza and the Italian Grand Prix. Kathryn, what happened last year for
So
those of
last
us
year,
who are under a rock?
So last year was a fun race if you were a Ferrari fan, if you're a member of the Tifosi. Charles did win. He broke through and was able to give the Tifosi something to be happy about. I don't really see that happening this weekend. So prepare yourselves, Tifosi. But this was also a really interesting race for two reasons. Number one, this was Kimi Antonelli's F1 practice debut, where after like 2.5 laps, he ended up putting Lewis's car on the wall. And this was actually a pivotal moment in the Kimi Antonelli documentary that was released on Netflix, which I also happen to be in. And if you haven't watched that yet, you should. It's called The Seat.
And you made the great prediction based on those 2.5 laps that there was no way he was going to get selected to be the second driver at Mercedes.
And guess what? We were really wrong, even though we did make that prediction months before he was put in the car, but same difference. And then the
Exactly.
other interesting factor was this was Franco Colapinto's F1 debut with Williams. He is now at Alpine, but this was when he made his debut at Williams after Logan Sargent was given his walking papers. And we were all really curious to see how he was going to do. And he finished P12, and we were all really excited and really looking forward to the future of Franco Colapinto at Williams, at least until Carlos Sainz was released from his contract at Ferrari.
Exactly. And as we well know, Franco has had his trials and tribulations at Alpine. And while everybody says he's going to be finishing the season, just as in FP1 for this year's race, we will see Paul Aaron in Franco's car for the first practice session.
Yeah, so as we all know, every driver has to give up two free practice ones for rookie / reserve drivers. Basically, if you haven't done, I think the rule is 2 Grand Prix, then you are eligible to be a free practice driver. So I am eligible to be a free practice driver, except I'm not. But Paul Aaron will be in the car. He's already done a few stints. He is kind of the free practice guy since Hirakawa moved from Alpine to Haas after Hirakawa presumably saw the writing on the wall at Alpine. But yeah, it's been a minute since we've seen a free practice driver. So Aaron will be in the car to continue to show off Alpine's mediocrity. He was great in FP2 or not FP2 in F2 last year. So the more experience that he can get in the car, the more of a chance that he might throw his name in for next season in the, let's be real, pretty likely event that Franco Colapinto is not going to maintain that seat.
That's very true. And if memory serves, this is Paul Aaron's third FP1 that he will be participating in this season.
That I can check on real quick. So actually, this is his first time with Alpine this season. The last 2 times that he was in the car, he was doing he was covering for stake drivers.
Aha. Okay.
Yes.
This is that actually is a significant difference.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. I know he's driven this season, but I don't feel like he's driven with Alpine this season. Here's the other thing: Jack Doohan was replaced by Ryo Hirakawa in round three, even though Jack Doohan didn't need to be replaced, and that was part of the Jack Doohan's not getting the appropriate chance to make a statement in the car. But anyway, yeah, so this will be Paul Aaron's third FP1 appearance of the season, but his first in the Alpine because they are sharing reserve drivers and amongst all of the midfield teams. So it will be interesting to see him, like I said, potentially make a statement in an Alpine. Will he make a statement for the season? Probably not, but we also never really know what Flavio Briatore is doing and or thinking. Then again, neither does he. So we'll see.
Well, we will find out with the rest of the Tifosi in Monza.
Yes.
And also, speaking of this year's race, Lewis is going to be serving a 5-place grid penalty for failing to slow under a double yellow in Zandvoort, which was decided after the race.
Yeah, so that happened, I think, on the way to the grid. I believe it was because it was definitely I did not wake up early to watch the pre-race show, but I do know that he was under investigation after the race had already started, and then finally, like 4 hours after the race, they're like, "Oh, by the way," so they were busy not talking to Carlos Sainz and deliberating on how to ruin Lewis's life more after he had already is currently being miserable in his Ferrari and also had crashed.
Yeah, yeah, it
So
was. Yeah, and you know, it's that paint and a little bit of drizzle and dampness in Zandvoort. I think that did him in. I mean, he did at the time. I don't believe he knew, but I think if you go back to the video, you saw that paint was slick, and he lost all traction.
yeah, which is one of the risks that you run when it's when you're on a wet track. So that was just really unfortunate for Lewis. Me being me and saying nice things at Lewis Hamilton, but it was very like you don't want him to be any more miserable than he already is, and like this guy, like you saw the writing on the wall going into his announcement of I'm moving to Ferrari because Ferrari is where driver champions' careers go to die, and I will die on that hill. But this was just like if it's that meme, the stop, he's already dead. Like that's what Lewis is living right now.
Adding insult to injury.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to our predictions for Monza. As you know, we pick pole, podium, and P10 and try to give ourselves points. We scored a point last week, but also last week we were so close to actually being correct because we picked the podium and we picked it correctly, except for the fact that Lando decided to, his car decided to take a little dump on track. So we are honestly doing better. So it will be very fun to see if we can keep the streak going. I don't think we can, but we're going to try anyway. So, starting with you, what is your prediction for pole for Monza?
I think for pole, McLaren is head and shoulders above everyone on the grid at the moment. I'm going to stick with Oscar.
Okay. I also went with Oscar, whereas Emily decided to split the difference of the McLaren drivers, and she is going with Lando. So either you and I are going to be right, or Emily is going to be right, and we'll
Well,
see.
and that's okay because there has been some alternating between Lando and Oscar, so this may be Lando's week.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's gonna need it to be his week, and he's gonna need next race to be his week, and the race after to be like he needs like he even said like, okay, so the only thing I have to do is win every race from here on out, which I don't think is feasible for Lando, but at least he has a direction in which he is going.
That is true. That is true, and there he's not nearly at the bottom, but he can go up.
Exactly. So moving on to podium, who is your podium for Monza?
Now, my podium for Monza is Lando, Oscar, Max.
Okay, my podium is Oscar, Lando, Max, which is our podium from last week. So maybe we're going to get this podium right again. And then Emily's podium is Oscar, Lando, and Charles. So she is really on the Ferrari, at least in one garage, is going to recover from the crises that we've seen last week.
That is a definite possibility. I think the only uh, uh, fly in that ointment could be George Russell.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we'll see. But heaven forbid we put any backing into George, because whenever we do, George decides to and
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So we'll see. And then moving on to P10, which Emily and I give ourselves 3 points for P10 because it's really hard to pick and we're really bad at it. Even though, we got really close last week, we picked the correct team, just the wrong driver. So who do you have going in P10?
I am going to go with one of my favorites, which is Fernando Alonso.
Okay. Aston Martin, we haven't really talked about them lately, but they've been really interesting lately. They've been qualifying really well or qualifying decently. Lance Stroll will crash in three consecutive practice sessions, and all of a sudden he's finishing in the points. Like they've just been like lately have just been so weird.
They are still searching for some sort of consistency.
Yes.
And that's
Bingo.
that's really what's been hampering them. It
Yeah.
just hasn't been there.
Yeah,
So
so it'll be interesting to see what they're going to be able to do with themselves until they can get the beautiful, wonderful, amazing Adrian Newey car in 2026. But Emily chose Kimi Antonelli for her P10 pick, which I think is really very interesting. I think that would just be like a moral victory for Kimi to get himself, into the points and to finish a race cleanly compared to how he's been the last few races. And, I think he's really tired of having to finish a race and then go to an opposing team's motorhome to apologize. So I think he just needs a break. He just needs to think about how life was at the very beginning of the season when he got into the car and finished P4, and just remember what that felt like in order to, stop driving the way he is now, because he's under immense amounts of pressure, especially as they're still dangling his contract in front of him and saying, we're not giving you your contract yet for no reason because Max isn't coming.
right. Well, sometimes you just gotta buckle down and drive, and just don't overthink it. Just drive.
Right. So we'll see. And then speaking of just drive while also just, being a race engineer and just being a race strategist, I am going with a Carlos Sainz P10 because, Alex has been driving great. So we just need the other side of the Williams garage to join him.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yes. And then moving on to the predictions that we don't give points for, that are just for funsies. Who or what is your biggest surprise for the weekend?
I am going to go with a second week in a row of double points for Haas.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like that when it was Hulkenberg and Magnussen, they would have a really great race and they would do a double points thing and be like, I want a second consecutive week of that. And then the Haas drivers would be like, no. So I think that that remains to be seen. I think that that's definitely a good option. This could be the track for them.
We shall see. We shall see.
Then my big surprise is that Ferrari pulls themselves out of their doldrums and gives the Tifosi something to smile about. Because if not, I think that the Tifosi are gonna riot, which I think there are already strikes happening in Monza right now. So I think that this might add some fuel to the fire of whatever labor actions are happening out there.
Well, this is going to be very interesting because my dumb for the week is Ferrari, just because they are, they continue to figure out a way to not work as a team and to not work on their cars individually and have no sense of tires or track or positioning or undercutting. It's
or
always,
anything.
yeah, it's always something.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably more likely than my prediction of a big surprise of them figuring things out. So that will be one of us is going to be right. So we'll see. And then my dumb of the weekend is I think that, Liam Lawson last week with his little tangle with Carlos Sainz and the like, I'm going to drive the way I want to drive. And, he can complain all he likes. He was the one who got the penalty. I think Liam Lawson and his aggressive driving style is going to get him into trouble this weekend.
It's a good possibility. Liam, I really thought that at with after getting demoted, that he was going to just knuckle down and really get to racing. But sometimes you can't cash in on your ego.
Yeah, it's he's already got the ego hurting because he did get demoted, very very immediately at the beginning of the season, and he's just he hasn't been seeing the same success as he's basically out driving Yuki in a poorer car, and Isaac Hadjar is leaps ahead of him, and is Red Bull's got his eye on him in a way that honestly, I think if somebody can survive the second Red Bull seat, I think it would be Isaac Hadjar. But I do think that we have a long way to go before Red Bull's going to make that decision, or before, Yuki's going to figure out what he wants to do, or figure out if there's a way to sneak him into Aston Martin by making Lance Stroll retire. So I think that, Lawson has a poor end of the stick that he's just been dealing with. And let's not make enemies on our way out.
I'm with you on that 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
All right. So, final thoughts on this week leading into Monza and what we expect out of the weekend, which will be a dry weekend, but confirmed. There's no rain in the forecast. There's no catastrophic rain that's not coming in the forecast, which I think was also another dumb thing about last week is oh my God, it's going to rain so much. And that weather prediction was from a week before anyone even sniffed at Zandvoort, and they're it's going to rain, and then it didn't rain at all. I mean, it rained a little, but not significantly.
Drivers are going to really have the opportunity to see what they can do to make the most of their cars.
And, yeah, I mean, this is a fast track, and there's a lot that you can do with it to be successful.
Absolutely true. And there are you have savants that like Max who can pull rabbits out of their hats while they're in the car on turn 12 and make the most out of their sectors. But I really think that this is going to be another stage where the McLarens are going to have the advantage and will be able to show their best.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. Obviously, Monza is one of the most fun races on the calendar. It's, it's a short track. It's a fast track. It is a very popular track for, the Tifosi. There's going to be a lot of Ferrari fans out there, and hopefully they will not be disappointed, even though they probably are going to be disappointed. But it's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of questions. How is Lando going to react after last week? How is Oscar going to react after last week? What does this mean for how Max can continue to perform? Will Isaac Hadjar be able to pull another surprise high finish out of his hat? Will Alex Albon be able to do the same? I think that we have a lot of really fun questions, and we have the potential to have another exciting weekend of racing.
Agree 100%. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So thank you for being here. We will have our Monza reaction up next on Monday. Emily will be back. Hopefully they let her, go home from work. But she should be back. She should be able to go home this weekend. But yes, this has been our Monza Predictions episode. Thanks for going off track with us, guys.
Thank you.